Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome once again to OB-GYN Education 23. It's a rainy day outside here, so it's appropriate that we're going to talk about saving for a rainy day. A couple of things before we get started. This is a general overview of financial information. We're going to cover a lot of topics, but we're really going to focus on starting to put some money away for savings for retirement specifically, taking advantage of plans that your employer might offer, including any matching funds that they offer. And we're going to talk a little bit about timing, how important it is to start saving early, even if it's very small amounts. Now, I am an OB-GYN, not a financial planner, not a CPA, not a lawyer, not a stockbroker. This is amateur but informed amateur opinion and advice. What I suggest you do, and we'll cover this at the end of the talk, what I suggest you do is to go out and find some of the myriad online resources available for investing, for savings, for personal finance in general, for budgeting, when it comes to mortgages, when it comes to auto purchases, when it comes to finances specifically for residents transitioning into new attendings where you've got that tremendous increase in earnings. There's so much information out there. And at the end of the talk, I do have a slide that looks at some of the sites that I found helpful, some of the more popular, more common sites as well. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff, but this is really just an introduction. There's a lot more that you can get into. Although, as we're going to talk about, you don't need to. You can actually keep this fairly simple and do it yourself for the vast majority of your saving life. So, having said that, let's go ahead and get started here. So let's start off the case study. We've got a 53-year-old male who complains of difficulty sleeping. He's waking up to pee at night quite a bit. He's had 3 months of, quote, some numbness in bilateral lower extremities. He's got high blood pressure, insulin-requiring diabetes, high cholesterol. He's had his appy out and a wrist fracture as a kid. No allergies, no meds. He does have a prescription for insulin, which he takes, quote, when he remembers. And the vitals are normal. His labs, he's got an A1C of 14.5. So you do your physical exam, and this is what his foot looks like. Why does this patient's foot look like this? And why, in the near future, perhaps, is he going to end up with a 4-foot amputation? Well, let's talk about that. I think that the reason is that hyperglycemia doesn't hurt. If you don't have a noxious stimuli, if you aren't experiencing pain, it's a lot easier to ignore unpleasant things, to put things off. It's hard to wrap our head around doing something now, especially if it's not causing us concerns in the present, but doing something now that's going to pay off, that has the dividends down the road. So, euglycemic now, exercise, overall health. That means 20 years from now, you'll have both your feet. 20 years is a long time. Today I'm okay. Or maybe I'm a little hyperglycemic today, but tomorrow will be better. I'll start working on it soon. Personal finances are the same. We're going to look at some statistics for the United States, looking at how much people have saved, how much people have in retirement accounts, and what we're going to find is that a lot of people in the United States have no money in savings for retirement. They have very little access to cash reserves for emergencies. And I think that if running a negative budget every month, if living on debt, if having high credit card bills every month that can't be paid off, if that were painful, then maybe like our patient with the chronic hyperglycemia, if it were painful, maybe we'd do something about it. Maybe that would motivate us to think a bit more about the future. So, as Isaac Dinesen says here, you can't change the past, but you can ruin the present by worrying about the future. Well, we don't want to worry about the future. We just want to take actions now that will help ensure that in the future we won't be worried. And down here, what I'm just kind of slightly hiding is the 1985 Oscar-winning movie Out of Africa. Isaac Dinneson's the pen name of a Danish writer by the name of Karen Blixen, played in the movie by Meryl Streep, and then the very handsome Robert Redford as well. So check that out. All right, what do people worry about? Top 4 concerns for the future. Financial instability right there, 36%. Political instability, well, given what's been going on in the last 7 to 8 years, no doubt that's on people's minds. Pandemic, yep, given the last 4 years, no concerns there. And global warming, 29%. When polled, 70% of Americans report feeling anxious about their financial situation. And one of the things that tends to cause anxiety in general is a lack of understanding, the unknown. So we're going to try today to answer some questions, to put some information out there that will help reduce some of these fundamental concepts that you just might not be aware of. A study was done looking to see if the average American could cover a $400 emergency expense. So, we've got to get our Donald Duck going here. 52% said that, yep, they've got cash reserves enough to cover $400. 16% put it on a credit card. 9% would borrow that money from family or friends. 6% say that they would have to sell something to come up with that money. 4% would borrow it from either a payday lender, which are horribly high interest rate options, or get it from a bank, which for a personal loan of that amount very likely would be a high interest rate. And shockingly, 13% said that they would have no way to pay for that emergency expense. Let's talk about retirement. People talk about savings, how much they have in the bank. Well, how much do you need to retire? If you're living in Hawaii, $120,000 a year, they say. Down here, where I live, Pennsylvania, $57,000. So I'm not sure exactly how they come up with those numbers, but as an annual spend in retirement, yeah, okay, seems reasonable. Maybe that's taking into account you're going to be getting, hopefully, some Social Security. So if you need that 120 a year in Hawaii, how much do you actually need to generate that income? 1.7 million in the bank. Down here in Pennsylvania, a little over 900,000. Okay, so have retirement savings that will fund your lifestyle when you're no longer working. However, how much do Americans actually have in their retirement savings? 52% of the United States say that they may not be able to pay for essential expenses in retirement. If you look here at median retirement savings balance, obviously young people under 35 don't have a whole lot, 18,000 saved. When you get up into the mid 40s, 45, 115,000 in the early 50s, and then kind of peaking at 65, retirement age, 65 to 70, and people have 200,000 saved. Well, that's quite short compared to the 1.7 million that you'd need to fund that lifestyle in Hawaii, or even the 920,000 that you would need to fund it in Pennsylvania. If we look over here at median 401k values, 401ks often have a bit of a match from your employer, so these values can be a bit higher. If you look at somebody in their 50s, 247,000, into the 60s, once people are starting to dip into that, make some withdrawals, that number starts to drop, and then down in the 80s, that number is down to $80,000. So people don't nearly have enough saved to be able to fund their life in retirement. See a lot of seniors working these days. Let's talk taxes for just a brief minute. The Boston Tea Party here. So let's take as example Jennifer, who makes $75,000 a year. What does she pay in total taxes each year? $11,500, $19,500, $24,500, or $32,600. Where do those taxes go? How does it get divided? We'll come to that in a minute. So the big answer is it depends which state she lives in, because each state has a somewhat different taxation. If she lives in Pennsylvania, then her total taxes here, $19,500. Here's William Penn landing, making contact with the native population. So let's break this down. We say that she's got $19,500 in taxes. So 15% of her income goes to federal taxes. That's 11,500. 3% of her income goes to state tax, 2,200. Social Security, she's going to end up paying 4,600 a year into that. The way that's calculated is that Social Security taxes are 6.2% on the first 168,000 that you earn. If you make more than 168,000, that income above 168 is not taxed for Social Security. And this limit here, this 168, tends to go up each year. Medicare taxes, she'll pay about $1,000. That's 1.45% of her income on the first 200,000 she makes. She makes obviously a bit more than that. And then 2.35% for anything above 200,000. State unemployment insurance, $45, and a York City tax if she lives in our lovely city of York, Pennsylvania, $176, 1.3%. So obviously the biggest expenditures here, 15% going to federal taxes and the 3% going to state. So let's talk about federal taxes for a minute. There you go, Andy. So we said that she paid $19,000 in total taxes, $11,500 in federal. So that's 15.4% of her income that we said. So is she in a 15% tax bracket? People talk about which tax bracket are you in. I don't want to go into a higher tax bracket. I don't want to make more money this year. Well, her effective tax rate is 12%. So if you take the amount of federal tax that she pays divided by her income, times that by 100, you get 12%. So, but her marginal tax rate, 22%. What's the difference here? Well, the marginal tax rate has to do with the fact that some of the money that she's earning is being taxed at 22%, but not all of it. All right, let's look at that. So federal taxes, oh, poor Dawson here. Federal tax is something that's called a progressive tax. So the more income you make, the larger percentage of your income that you pay in federal tax. You don't pay the same percentage on every dollar that you've earned. What? How does that work? Well, let's take a look at it. So this is our federal tax here. If you make less than $11,600, you're going to end up paying 10% of your income in taxes. If you make between $11,600 and $47,150, then for any money you make between this range, you pay 12%. So 10% on that first $11,600, 12% on anything you make above that up to $47,000. If you make over $47,000, then you're at 22%. So with her income of the $75,000, that puts her here with a highest marginal tax rate of 22%. But she's only paying that 22% on income over $47,000 that she's earned. And then you can see this goes up 24, 32, 35, and then the highest marginal tax in the United States is 37%, and that's on any earnings over $609,000. So if we look at it here, on the dollars that she earns between nothing and 11,600, so that first 11,600, she pays 10% tax. For the next approximately $36,000 she earns, she pays 12%, and then after that 22%. So Uncle Sam isn't taking 22% of her entire income. He's taking 22% of just this upper part. The 70% here has to do with some historic highest marginal tax brackets, which we'll look at. There are some folks that propose having a much higher upper limit for taxation. If you think that in the United States, the idea of 70% as a tax rate is insane, well, historically, 1920s, 73% was the highest marginal tax rate. In the 1950s, it was 90%. So again, not 90% of all income for those very wealthy folks, but above a certain income, anything they made above that cutoff was taxed at 90%. And then in the 1980s, 69% was the highest. So today with our 37% marginal tax rate, it's actually quite a bit lower than what it's been historically. And if you look just kind of for interest's sake to compare that to other countries, so again, we're down here, 37% is our highest marginal tax rate. What is it in some developed countries in Europe? France, 55%, Germany, 50%, 45% in Great Britain. Scandinavian countries, 51, 52%. Norway's a little over at 39. Spain, high at 54. But you have to ask yourself, okay, these folks are paying a lot in taxes, the high earners especially, but what are they getting for that? Well, free education, free healthcare. And when I say free, I mean, yes, it's being paid for by taxes, but it's available to all, and it isn't something that people have to really budget for in general. So there's a trade-off paying taxes but getting more services. This has to do with the value-added tax that's paid in Europe. This is a variation of a sales tax, which we're going to talk about in the US in just a minute. But you can see here, France 20%, Spain 21%, Germany 19%. So on money that people are spending, like a sales tax, they're actually paying quite a bit more. So let's come back to our example here for Jennifer, and we're going to look at her actual income. So 75,000 a year. So we've got a total of 75 down here in blue. Like we said, for that first 11,600, she's paying 10%, so that's 1,160. Anything that she earns here between 11 and 47, so that's 35,500 of earnings, she pays 12%, so that's another 4 grand in taxes. And then her final 27,000 that she earns to get her up here, kind of to this 75,000 mark, she pays 22% on that, so 6,127. So that's her total federal tax of 11,000. So as you can see here, each dollar that she makes as she crosses over these boundaries, she's paying a higher percentage of that income into taxes. So let's look at state taxes for a second. State taxes vary, of course, by state. Here in Pennsylvania, we have a highest marginal tax rate of just over 3%. Our neighbors to the north in New York, 10%. Some others that are kind of high, Minnesota's at 9%, California's at 13%. You've got a couple here, Nevada, Wyoming, South Dakota, Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Alaska, no state income tax at all. So for retirement, those might be places that you'd want to live, or perhaps not, but if you live there, you won't be paying any state tax. There are also, of course, sales taxes to keep in mind. So those state taxes are what you would pay on your earnings, your income. Sales tax, obviously, that's a tax that we pay on the money we spend. There are categories of things that we pay sales tax on. There are some goods that we don't pay sales tax. But in general, here in Pennsylvania, we've got a sales tax of 6%. So depending on what our federal rate is, we said that for our example of Jennifer, her highest was 22% for her marginal, but that her kind of average effective tax rate, I think we said it was around 12. But then also she's paying 3% to the state income tax, paying 6% in the sales tax, on and on and on. So it just keeps adding up. A couple of states, New Hampshire, Delaware, and then out west, Montana and Oregon, don't have sales tax. So again, depending on retirement plans, you can definitely look at places that have higher or lower taxation, both for income and sales tax. So let's talk about income. Everybody wants to make more money. How do we go about doing that? Well, we can either earn more, open up a lemonade stand with Beyonce. We can pay less in taxes, so we get to keep more of our money, but you have to be a bit careful how you do that, or you'll end up over here with Willie and Martha and Nick Cage and the Sitch up here. These are folks that didn't pay taxes the way that they were legally required to, so ended up with fines and in jail, which for Martha Stewart seemed to lead to her friendship with Snoop Dogg, so, you know, not a complete loss. The other way to make more money is to invest some of your earnings and then let that money grow. What I would suggest is the best way to earn more is to do all of these things. So, you know, you will, over the lifetime of your career, hopefully be continuing to make more and more each year. There are ways that we can use the tax code to our advantage in a completely legal way to pay less in taxes. And then also by investing money and letting it grow over time, that'll give us more down the road. So let's talk about paying less taxes first off. Does that mean that we're going to make less money and so hence pay less tax? No, 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 no. What we're going to do is we're going to learn to play by the rules that allow you to decrease the amount of your income that you're responsible to pay taxes on. So this is reducing your taxable income, also called your adjusted gross income. Again, not a CPA. This dovetails nicely with the idea of investing, because putting money into some savings plans, retirement plans, especially some that are sponsored by your employer, those are tax advantaged plans. They are money that go in before you pay taxes. So if you make $75,000 a year but put $5,000 into some of these retirement savings accounts, you're going to end up paying federal state taxes on $70,000 in income instead of $75,000. Let's look just at an example of a straight income here. So you're an attending making $350,000 a year. So that's $13,465 a paycheck, 26 paychecks a year, and you don't have any specific savings that we're talking about. So here's your bi-monthly paycheck. You pay on average, so an effective tax rate of 29%, so $3,900 out of each paycheck. Federal and state taxes, and this is specifically Medicare and Social Security, 4.8% there, so 656. We're not doing any pre or post tax investment stuff, and so your take home each paycheck is 2/3 of your gross income. You're paying about 1/3 into taxes overall, so each paycheck you get to deposit $8,888. So at the end of the year, you're making a net of $231,000, and you paid $101,000 in taxes up here, the orange part of the pie. All right, well, this is an example from my life. I contribute to a 403 for my employer. I put 9% of my income into that. I also contribute to a 457, which is kind of a deferred compensation plan. And we're going to talk about these plans and different types of retirement savings. I put 4% of my income into that 457. And then also on my mortgage interest, I pay about $18,000 a year in interest on my mortgage, and so that is tax deductible as well, so to speak. So let's pretend that my income is $350,000 a year. So we've got our paycheck here, $13,400. My effective average tax rate, 21%. So $29,000 there going to federal and state. For my Social Security Medicaid taxes, paying $627 per paycheck. But here I've got my, and for my employer this should actually be 403B, not the 401k. So I'm putting 9% into that. I've got a 457, that deferred compensation. I'm putting 4% into that. And honestly, I'm not sure about the medical insurance there. I currently, not sure what that is. Anyway, so 55% of my gross income I get to take home, so $7,400. So that means that I'm netting $193,000 a year, plus the $45,000 that I'm saving, just putting that money into the employer-sponsored plans. So a net of $238,000, and then I'm paying federal taxes of $76,000. So when we do a comparison, you can see that my paycheck has dropped a little bit with that saving that I'm doing. So it goes from $8,800 down to $7,400. But my tax rate has decreased quite a bit. I'm paying 29% into federal state taxes here, whereas over here I'm down to just 22%. So because I'm using those employer-sponsored retirement plans, I actually get to pay less in taxes. So instead of paying $100,000 a year, I'm paying $76,000 a year. And again, a little bit lower what is actually getting deposited into my bank through my paychecks. But when you couple that with the money that I'm putting into the retirement savings, my overall net income has gone up about $7,000. So I'm not making any more. Each of these, the examples, $350,000 a year. But because I'm putting money into those tax-advantaged accounts, so pre-tax money, paying less in income tax, my overall net income, so to speak, goes up. Now, let's say that not only am I doing my 403 contribution, my retirement plan at work, putting 9% of my salary in, but let's say that my employer has a match. Let's say that they'll match 6% of my income, so $21,000 a year, 6% of that $350,000. The way that my employer, WellSpan, actually does it is that they put in 4% guaranteed. So 4% of my income, they'll match right off the bat. And then if I put in a couple of more percent, they'll put in up to another 2%. So a total of 6% from the employer. So we come over here, we do our same calculations. I've got my 193 from my paychecks, 45 that I'm saving myself, plus 21 that my employer is matching. So now I'm at 259. So I've gone from, if I'm not using any employer retirement plans, I'm bringing home 231, 238 if I'm doing some of that savings on my own, and up to 259 if I have an employer match. And again, my salary itself has not gone up. I'm not working harder, I'm not working more. All I'm doing is saving money through those specific accounts and taking advantage of my employer's matching plan. All right, let's look at this for resident numbers. $65,000 a year. So here's your bi-weekly paycheck, $2,500. What you're paying in taxes here. So you're bringing home $1,973 each paycheck. $51,000 a year is what you're making. You're paying $8,700 in taxes. If you do a 4% into your, and again, this should say 403. Every new employer at the WellSpan Hospital here gets enrolled for a 4% contribution from the employees' earnings. So if you're taking advantage of that, yeah, your paycheck does go down a bit. You've gone from $1,900 a paycheck to $1,895. So, I mean, it drops, what, $120? No, that's actually not true. Even less. So you've got your 49 net plus the 2,600 that you put into savings. That's your 4%, 2,600 a year. So your actual total net income for the year has gone up by about $570. So again, you are making money just by using the right savings account, so to speak, the employer-sponsored 403. And the reason that you're making money, have more to put in your bank throughout the year, is that you're reducing your adjusted gross income by contributing to that 403. All right, let's talk about retirement accounts in general. 401ks and 403bs, these are things that usually an employer will provide. Health savings accounts you can set up on your own. 457s also tend to be through employers. They're a bit more rare, but we'll look at those. IRAs, individual retirement accounts that you can set up on your own. People tend to have a lot of questions about traditional versus Roth. Is Roth the better option to go? We'll examine that. And then we're going to talk briefly about 529 education savings plans, because those can be both for, paying for kids' school expenses, but then also as a bit of an investment for them down the road. That can be a nice option as well. So let's look at the employer-sponsored 401k, 403b. The money that goes into these comes in before you pay taxes. So again, let's say that you have that $350,000 income. Let's say that you put 23 into your 401 or 403. So now you're left with 327. That's what you're going to pay taxes on, is the 327. So you've lowered the amount of money that you have to pay taxes on because this 23 is coming out right off the top before you have to pay taxes. So as it says here, money goes in before taxes are paid. When you take this money out down the road, it's taxed just as regular income. There is a contribution limit to these, $23,000 a year, but then you can put an additional $7,500 in each year once you're 50 years and older. So that would raise the total to $30,500. Let's talk about HSAs for a minute. This is something that a lot of people don't know about, but it's a very, very powerful way to save. A health savings account, HSA, lets you set aside money for qualified medical expenses, such as deductibles, co-payments, co-insurance, prescriptions, medical equipment, dental cleanings, eye exams, braces, orthodontics, therapy, ambulance fees, some alternative non-traditional medicine, qualified long-term care services, and many, many more things. The one thing you cannot use an HSA to pay for are the monthly premiums for your health insurance, so you can't use it to pay that month-to-month bill. The big advantage to HSAs is that you get a triple tax savings. So the money that you contribute to it goes in pre-tax, like for the 401, 403. All of the money that it's earning, all of that interest it's earning and growing over the years, that's tax-free as well. And then even the distribution. So when you take it out for qualified medical expenses, that's tax-free as well. So this is money that when you earn it, when you save it, and when you spend it, you never have to pay taxes on. That is unheard of in the U.S. system. A couple of things. There is a $4,150 individual limit per year, or $8,300 for a family. You can do an additional $1,000 a year if you're 50 or older. After you're 65 years old, you can take distributions out of this for any reason. It doesn't have to be for health expenses. But then you do pay income tax on the distribution. So similar to the 401, 403. You pay taxes on it when you take it out. So this is something that you can use for medical expenses, but there is a bit more flexibility there as far as being able to use it just for other miscellaneous retirement expenses, but then you lose a little bit of the tax advantage. So let's talk about employer-sponsored 457B. This is what's listed as a deferred compensation plan. When you contribute to it, it is pre-tax, like the 401 and 403. This is something that's offered to high earners in state and local government positions or nonprofit organizations. It has a contribution limit similar to the 401 and 403, so $23,000 a year, and does allow for catch-up contributions an additional $7,500 if you're over 50, if you work in a government state or federal system where you've got that governmental plan. These limits are separate from what you're actually using to contribute to your 403. So you can do $23,000 a year into each the 403 and the 457. When distributions are taken, it's taxed as ordinary income. You can take the money out prior to retirement without penalty if you have separated from that employer. One thing to be aware of is that there is a little bit of vulnerability here because the 457 plan is backed by and owned by the employer. So it is subject to their financial health, and it can't be rolled over to another retirement account. So it really is kind of their account to manage for life. If you work for a small system, someone who's having financial difficulties, there is a possibility that you would not be fully funded or be able to fully recoup your money. But I wasn't really able to find specific examples of that. Another thing is that you can't take any sort of loan out of your 457 unless you have a governmental plan. So if you have a plan through a nonprofit, you can't take a loan out and then pay it back. It would just have to be a distribution. There is some talk, some kind of fine print about being able to double the annual limit. So instead of that $23,000, you'd be able to put away $46,000 a year, or maybe even up to that full $30,500 if you're over 50. So that would bump it up to what, $61,000. But this would only be if you're within 3 years of a normal retirement age, and that retirement age is defined by the plan itself. All right, let's talk about IRAs, individual retirement accounts. So two big breakdowns here. On the right, we've got a traditional IRA. So you get your tax break up front. The money that you put in, you're not paying taxes on. But then when you take the money out in retirement, you do pay taxes on it as ordinary income. With the Roth IRA, the contrast here is that with the Roth, the money you put into a Roth IRA is after you've paid taxes. But then as that money grows, and then when you go to take the money out, you do not pay taxes on it. So you pay tax on the initial investment, but all of the growth, when you take that money out, you don't pay taxes on that. So contributions are, going back to traditional IRA here, contributions are pre-tax. This does lower your adjusted gross income. It lowers the amount of taxes that you're going to pay. And then when you take out withdrawals, they're taxed as ordinary income. Contribution limits for IRAs, $7,000 a year, or you can do $8,000 a year if you're over 50. You can withdraw these funds starting at 59 and a half years old without paying a penalty. You can do it before 59 and a half with certain qualified conditions. There are required minimum distributions once you get 73 years old. So once you get to 73 years old, you have to start taking money out of this IRA, the traditional IRA. How much you have to take out per year is dictated by the plan itself. So let's compare that to a Roth IRA. As we said, contributions are after taxes have been paid. So this does not reduce your adjusted gross income. It doesn't reduce your tax burden, but the withdrawals are tax-free. So all the money that you've earned throughout the years and years of growth, all of that money is tax-free if you start taking it out when you're 59 and a half or older, and if you have had the money in there for at least 5 years. Contribution limit, the same as for traditional, $7,000 a year or $8,000 a year if you're 50 or over. The thing with a Roth IRA, there are income limits. If you make individually $161,000 or more, you cannot contribute directly to a Roth IRA, or a limit of $228,000 if you're married and filing joint taxes. We're going to come back and talk about the workaround for these limits. There's no required minimum distribution, so that means that you can never take money out of a Roth IRA and pass it on in your estate. So you can pass it on to your kids or whoever, and whoever is inheriting it, those withdrawals when they take it out, still tax-free for them. So it is kind of an inheritable tax advantaged system. So again, just a bit of a breakdown here, the differences between the traditional and the Roth. A lot of people have the impression, and there's a lot of information out there, that Roth is always the way to go. Always go Roth. And it's quite a bit more complex than that, but let's look at a couple of real-world examples. So what we're going to look at here is if you've got $6,000 that you can put into an IRA. Well, if you put it into a Roth, you're going to end up paying some taxes on that. So you're going to, let's say that you've got a 20% effective tax rate. You're going to end up paying $1,200 in taxes. So you're actually going to have $4,800 to invest. And that's represented down here with the blue dot. If you have a traditional IRA, the money goes in pre-tax, so you can put the full $6,000 in because you're not paying any taxes on it when you invest it. So let's say that money grows from when you're 30 years old to when you're 60 years old. The overall growth of that money is that it will be up to, if you've put in $4,800 into your Roth, it's going to be worth 39 grand. If you put in the full 6,000 into the traditional, it's worth a bit more, 48,000. But with the Roth, when you go to take that money out, no taxes paid. So you get that full 39,000. In the traditional, again, you've got a higher balance, 48,000, but you do have to pay taxes on it. You're going to, and again, if we go with that kind of 20% effective tax rate, you're going to pay $9,700 in taxes. So you're going to end up with about $39,000 in cash. So in this example, where you've got the same kind of 20% effective tax bracket at the time that you're saving the money and then at the time that you're taking it out, how much you end up with in the end, about the same. Let's look at another example here where you're in a lower tax bracket at 30 than when you start taking that money out at 60. So let's say you're the resident who's making $65,000 a year, but then when you're 60 and looking at starting to retire, let's say that you've got an income of, say $300,000, or you're going to be cutting back because you're in retirement, so now you've got $150,000 that you're going to be living off of. So lower tax bracket when you're putting that money away, higher tax bracket when you're taking it out. So again, we're assuming kind of a 20% effective tax rate when you invested at 30, but a higher 32% effective rate when you're taking that money out at 60. So again, for the Roth, you pay taxes. So you've got your $4,800 that you invest, but that grows to $39,000. You don't take any tax out of that. For the traditional, not paying any taxes on the initial $6,000, but when it grows, you have to pay $15,000 in taxes. So now you've only got $33,000 to actually use in retirement. So because you're paying a higher amount of tax on the money you're withdrawing than you paid on the money that you put in for the Roth, it actually works out, the advantage here is for the Roth. Let's talk about how high earners can utilize Roth IRAs. This is something called a backdoor Roth. So what you do is you contribute those pre-tax dollars to a traditional IRA. So you fill up your traditional IRA bucket here. And then what you do is you convert that into a Roth IRA. Now, because the money that you put into your traditional you did not pay taxes on, when you do this conversion, you do have to pay taxes on the money that you're transferring into the Roth. But you pay those taxes up front, and then in the Roth account, as that money grows, and then as you go to take it out, you do not pay any taxes. That's, again, the advantage of the Roth. No taxes on that money that you're withdrawing. So it gets you a bit of the best of both worlds. It allows you to contribute to a Roth with kind of getting out from under that $161,000 a year income limit, which hopefully all of us as attendings are going to be over. But then you get the tax-free distribution in retirement. So backdoor Roth, lots and lots of information online about that, and it's something that you can do easily yourself. All right, let's look again, make a little comparison here between traditional and Roth. We're going to say that as a resident, you're making $65,000 a year. Here with your traditional 403, because there are Roth components to 403s, employer savings plans, 401s, 403s can have Roth components. So if that's the case, if you're not doing an IRA outside of your employer, let's look at how this shakes up. So $65,000 a year, we put in some pre-tax money, $2,600. So again, we're looking at kind of that 4%. $2,600 goes in pre-tax, so our taxable income, adjusted gross income, drops down to $62,400. We pay $7,900 in taxes, and so we've got a net of $54,000 that we've earned that year. Let's say that we utilize a Roth part of our 403 instead. So again, gross income 65, we're getting taxed on 65, so those taxes are a little bit higher here, 8,500. That drops our 2,600 here after we've paid taxes. So what we're actually bringing home, 53,800. So if we do the Roth, we actually have about $600 less in spendable money at the end of the year. However, what happens is that money grows. So over here are our conditions. We're putting $2,600 in. We're going to say it grows at 7% for 30 years. So it grows into $21,000. Well, with the traditional plan, that $21,000, when you take it out, you pay taxes on it. And down here, I just kind of assumed, let's say in retirement, we're making $150 a year, and that puts us at a 20.45% effective tax rate. So we have our $21,000 that our retirement account has earned. Total, we pay $4,300 on taxes, so we've got $16,000 to spend in retirement. If we had done the Roth, our money grows, the $2,600 we invested grows to that same $21,000, but now we get to take it out tax-free, not paying any taxes, so we get that full $21,000 to spend. So we're making about $4,300 more to spend in retirement by utilizing the Roth. Even if you account for the $600 difference here, the year that we earned that money and put it into our 403, even if you account for that $600 difference, you're still coming out about $3,700 ahead for having utilized the Roth. Let's look at this very quickly with the attending salary. So here's our $350,000. We're maximizing our 403, $23,000. So our adjusted gross income here, this is what we're paying in taxes. So our net take home for that year, $235,000. Over here, we've got our $350,000 that we've made. We're paying taxes on that full $350,000, so we're paying $100,000 in taxes. But that still leaves our net income at that point higher. But then there we take out our $23,000 to put it into our Roth. So that gives us $226,000. So $8,700 less in spendable money if we've done the Roth. But again, let's say that money's going to grow. We put our 23 in, 7% growth over 30 years. That money turns into $186,000. Well, if we have a traditional plan, we have to pay taxes on that money when we're taking it out. So it drops that 186 down to 148,000. Whereas with the Roth, the money that's grown to the 186, we don't pay taxes. We've got 186 to spend. So we've got $38,000 more utilizing the Roth. And again, even if we do take out this $8,000 difference, 8,000 less that we had to spend in the year that we invested that, we're still coming out $29,000 ahead. So again, the Roth comes out on top. All right, let's talk briefly about 529 education savings plans. These are tax advantage savings plans. So contributions are taxed, but some states allow for tax deductions for contributions, but not all states allow for that. So the contributions are taxed in some states, but not all. But withdrawals, as you're taking that money out to pay for educational expenses, withdrawals are not taxed. So there are two types of 529s. One's called an education savings plan, and this is basically just a savings type of account. You put money into it, that money grows, and then you take that money out and use it for qualified educational expenses. Those expenses include tuition and fees, room and board, books and supplies, also elementary and secondary schooling up to $10,000 a year. This would cover private, religious, or public schools. And there are certain apprenticeship programs that money can be used for out of 529s, and some other options as well. The other option is what's called a prepaid tuition plan. So this is basically paying tuition now for your kid to go to college years down the road. You're paying today's tuition rate, but for future education. So what you do is you purchase units or credits to be used at participating colleges, specific colleges and universities. Prepay future tuition at today's prices. Mostly this is done in your home state to public colleges or universities. If your kid decides not to go to college, not to go to the certain college system that you've got the tuition credits bought and paid for, if they decide to go somewhere else, you can still take money out of a prepaid tuition plan and use that for expenses, but there can be a penalty with that. So you may not get the full dollar amount. 529 plans are run by individual states. So if you do a search for your state and look up it's 529, you'll come up with this information. For Pennsylvania, there are a couple here that came up, PA 529. So with 529s, there's no contribution limit. You can put in as much as you want each year. The plans are sponsored by individual states. As we talked about, they have to be used for these qualified educational expenses, or you're going to end up paying a 10% penalty. However, if not all the money is used for educational expenses, you can roll it over into a Roth IRA in the name of the beneficiary, your kid. There is, however, a limit of $35,000 that you can roll over, and the annual Roth contribution limits, so that $7,000 or $8,000 if you're 50 years or older, those contribution limits still apply. To be able to do that rollover, the 529 plan must have been in existence for at least 15 years, and any money that's actually being rolled over has to have been in the plan for at least 5 years. So you can't just dump a bunch of money into a 529 and then the next day roll it over into a Roth. Anyone can contribute to 529. So family, friends, strangers, do a GoFundMe, whatever you want to do. The beneficiary is the one who actually gets the money, but whoever originated the plan, the holder of the plan, gets the tax benefits. So if grandma and grandpa contribute to a 529, they don't get a tax benefit. Whoever actually set the account up gets the tax benefit, and then the beneficiary gets the dollar amount. Question of when to start a 529. Right now, you can officially start it in the name of your child as soon as they have a social security number. However, you can actually start one before your kid is born. You just have to put yourself as the beneficiary and then change that to the child after delivery and when they have a social security number. So let's take a look at what a 529 can do for you. So Elspeth is just born, and we would think that she may want to go to Pitt in Pittsburgh. So that's almost $36,000 a year for tuition and room and board and fees. We're going to put in $250 a month. We're hoping that money grows at about 7%. So from the time she's born until she turns 18. And then we're figuring that we're going to end up paying for about 80%, or she's going to end up paying for 80% of her college expenses. So maybe 20% scholarship, tuition waiver, whatever. So how far is our money going to get us? Well, her first year is paid for. About half of her second year is paid for, and that's it. So the estimated cost of education, $392,000. The amount that is actually going to need to be paid, so 80% of that, $313,000, and we've only saved 123 of it. So we've only saved about 39% of what she's going to need. We would need to put an additional $340 a month in there to meet the full funding. So let's just do another simple one. We've bumped it up. We've doubled it to $500 a month, still 7%, still planning on paying for about 80% of the overall fees. Well, by bumping it up to $500, we've paid for 3 and maybe part of her first semester of her senior year, if it's a 4-year plan to graduation. So by putting in, an extra $250 a month, which, that's not nothing, but it's not, huge. But by putting that extra money, you've gone from paying for 39%, I think it's here, 39% of her education up to 83% of it. So just a little bit left here that, maybe some loans, some work study, or as it says here, if we put in just an additional $90 a month, so put $590 a month, then that would pay the full 4 years. All right, so let's talk about the retirement plans. How do you decide what you want to put your money into in your 401? Because you get to pick how you want that money invested. You get to pick usually not individual stocks, but more mutual funds or ETFs, which we can talk about, look up. But how do you decide? My advice, keep it simple. Simple, simple, simple. A simple and diversified approach is going to be picking individual stocks almost every single time. So you don't need to be a stock guru. You don't need to be doing day trading. You don't need to hang out on Wall Street Bets on Reddit. All you have to do is, as Jack Bogle suggested, the founder of the Vanguard Group, all you have to do is, his approach specifically is pick 3 funds. So one that represents the U.S. market overall, so kind of U.S. economic health, international markets in developed countries, and then some government-backed U.S. bonds. Index funds are what these are called. Index funds rise and fall with the overall value of the U.S. stock market. So they do go up and they go down. The trend over time, as we'll look at, is that they go up in the long run. And this means that you do not need to know about stocks. That's one thing that really gets in people's head, is to say, I don't know about investing, I don't know about stocks, I don't know what I invest in, what if I lose money? So you don't need to know about stocks, you don't need to pick specific stocks. Index funds can have some volatility, they go up and down, but over the long run, again, they go up. So here's the U.S. stock market, the Dow Jones from 1915 to 2023. So some big ups, big downs. You can look over here at this graph on the right and see, so here's the panic of 1907, World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression, a big drop there. Here's kind of a downturn from the 70s to 80s, and then they call this kind of the lost decade starting in 2000, the big financial real estate bust in 2008. So lots of ups and downs, but as you can see, the overall trend is that it goes up. Will that continue to happen? I don't know. My crystal ball is at the shop getting polished. Historically speaking, we have a lot we can look backwards over retrospectively. Historically speaking, it goes up in the long run. When it does go down, it usually starts to come back up and correct within a couple of years. So let's look a little bit at this approach, and then we're going to see kind of what I do with my personal retirement stuff. So total stock market for the United States, this ratio, it's got 2/3, 64% in there. International in the purple here, 16%, and then the government bonds about 20%. And this is just one way to do it. You can go and read all sorts of 3-fund portfolio Boglehead approaches. Very simple to set up, and you can kind of pick the ratio that you want. Each big kind of investment firm has their own funds. So Vanguard funds are listed here. These are their mutual funds. Charles Schwab funds listed here, and Fidelity here. not a significant difference between these. Again, if you get online and look at some investing things, I read Reddit quite a bit because there are a lot of different subreddits that talk about personal finance at different income levels and different approaches. But down here on the bottom, these are some samples of 3 fund portfolios, and you can see that the ratio is changing. So over here on the right, very heavily in the U.S. If we're looking at blue, less for the U.S. stock market and a lot here in bonds. Over here on the left, it's a little bit more evenly distributed, almost 50% with U.S. there. One thing that most people will want to do is, as you get closer to retirement, you want to readjust the balance of this. When you're young and you've got time on your side, and if things go down, you can kind of wait it out. You can afford a little bit more risk. You want to be more heavily into stock, because stock, the mutual funds, the index funds are a little bit more volatile. So the overall U.S. stock market. As you get closer to retirement, you want to lose some of that volatility. So you want to shift money out of the U.S. market and international markets more into some bonds. And again, the ratios and the timing of how you do that, you can look into, but you don't really need to worry about it, which we're going to come to in a minute. So this is my 457. This is my deferred compensation plan through my employer. Right now, I'm putting about $600 per paycheck into it. So at the end of the year, I should have contributed about $15,200. My current balance, I just started this last year. My current balance is $10,000, and it's been going gangbusters. So I've earned almost 25% on that. And what I do right down here, there's my 3-fund portfolio. So the green here is U.S. markets, the blue is international, and the gold are bonds. And again, you can see over here the Vanguard Institutional, that's the U.S. The blue developed markets, that's the international, and then the bonds in yellow, and kind of the ratios that I've got that at. And you can do it a million different ways, but it's very, very easy to set up on your own. So one way to make this even simpler, you don't even have to pick 3 funds, you can just pick one. And this is what I do with my 403 through my employer, WellSpan. I don't even do 3 different funds, let alone doing more than that. I put everything into a target date fund. So let someone else pick which specific instruments are going to be invested in, and then also do that rebalancing as you get closer to retirement. They rebalance your portfolio over time as retirement approaches. You get to just pick a year. What year do you think you're going to retire? Maybe you're going to retire in 2065. All right, well, then you just come down here and you say, here we go. Here's Vanguard's target retirement date 2065 fund, and you just put your money in there. It's diversified. It's going to weather the ups and downs fairly well. It's not going to be the most aggressive at earning interest and growing, but it's also not going to be super risky. And then again, it gets rebalanced as you get closer to retirement. So when you're young, target date funds here, this is going to be more US, international, and then bond. And you can see that as you get closer to retirement, it starts to rebalance and shift towards more of the what they call here treasury inflation protection, so bonds, and then some the bonds here in blue, and the treasury inflation protection securities here in light blue, and then a bit of cash as well. So when you get to retirement here at the little pyramid, and then as you get a little bit post retirement, and then it kind of hits these ratios and keeps them consistent. So real world example, here's my 403b. Like I said, I contribute about 9% of my paycheck. 6% of that goes in to traditional, so before tax. So that's my tax advantage. 3% of it I have going into a Roth, so I'm going to get that tax-free growth. This is just something that I came up with. I can't really say that that there's a better or worse way to do that. Again, it just goes back to the Roth aspect. I like the tax savings that I get with the contribution here to the traditional, but I also want to be able to take some out when I retire and not have to pay tax on that. So anyway, my max, because I'm over 50 years old, is $30,500. So I'm on track to hit that. And the way I have it divided here, you can see the green. What I had initially started putting it into is a 2035 Vanguard targeted retirement, And then I've kind of transitioned and started here with the blue to some of this 2045, just so there's a little bit of a different ratio there. And this is spelled out very clearly on pay stubs. So here's part of my pay stub from WellSpan, and what I'm paying in taxes up here. This has my Roth component contribution. Down here it comes to employer contribution, my 403 contributions there, and then down here the employer, there's the 457 and the employer 403. So it spells it out very easily. You can track. I also have a spreadsheet that I've made where here's my contribution to my 403, here's the Roth component, here's my employer match, my employer base, and then what I put in for my 457. I also track how much I'm paying in taxes as well, federal, state, and Social Security, again on that first, what did we say, 168,000. I like to be able to just look at this and have kind of a snapshot of how much I'm putting away. So developing a personal budget, we're not going to really spend any time talking about this other than just to say, do it. It's tough. It's tough to make a budget and stick to it. But if nothing else, you can see where your money is coming in from, where it's going out to. And I think for a lot of people, it does help them to save, to be able to see hard, sometimes unpleasant numbers of what's our spending, what's our saving, what can we do better. All right. That's the end of part one. What was that? About an hour. So let's take a break. We'll come back to part two whenever you're ready for that. Thank you.